My name is Vince Leggett, and I am the founder and the president of the Blacks of the Chesapeake Foundation. For the last 30 years, we've been documenting the contributions of African Americans in the maritime and seafood processing industry throughout the Chesapeake Bay region. We're at Elktonia Heritage Park today, and this is the marquee project of Blacks of the Chesapeake to date. We live in a seaport town, and it's becoming more and more difficult for the average person to gain access to the water's edge. And this is one of the major objectives of this whole Elktonia Heritage Beach story. One, to provide access to all people to the water's edge. In order to really get more advocates around the bay and the rivers and the creeks, they need to have some contact with it, because so often people look at the Chesapeake Bay just as a playground for the rich. But what we want to do with this project is to provide access to all people, but also to elevate the voices and tell the stories of African American life on the Chesapeake Bay. Over the last 3 or 4 years, the project took on a new life, and the developers had approved plans to build 40 townhouses on this 5 acres, starting at $800,000 a piece, and that didn't include stainless steel or granite. Mayor Buckley had approached the developers and said that we would love to preserve this as a heritage park. And what we also did was just establish this walking trail to, again, the public has not had access to this 5 acres for the last 50 years. And one of the things we wanted to do was to provide at least some access, because from the highway, all you see is trees. No one had a clue on what was behind the tree line. And the storyline starts in 1902 when Mr. Fred Carr and his wife Mary Wells amassed 180 acres on the Chesapeake Bay. And in 1931, the 2 daughters, Miss Elizabeth Carr Smith and Mrs. Florence Carr Sparrow, created 2 of the fabulous beaches, Carr's and Sparrows Beach. They had beauty contests there. They had swimming, because during this period of segregation where African Americans, coloreds, and Negroes couldn't go to public pools because of segregation, they were swimming in the bottoms and in the hollows and down in the holes, and there were so many drownings. The spaces weren't supervised, they didn't have any depth finders, and so Mrs. Carr and Mrs. Sparrow worked with the YMCA, YWCA, and began to have fishing camps. It wasn't any hats on backwards and pants on the ground when they came to Carr's and Sparrows Beach. The men had on straw hats, the lady had on their Sunday dresses, they had the spat shoes on and spectator shoes, and it was just a great day at the beach. And some of the stars that came to the beach were Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Sarah Vaughan, Chuck Berry drew 70,000 people, and on any given weekend, James Brown would pack in 11,000. Music, music, music. One of the things that people want to talk about was just the social, political, and cultural impact of music during this era. And Jackie Wilson, the Motown crowd, Smokey Robinson, the Miracles, the Temptations, the Marvelettes, the Drifters. We had people like Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald. I mean, the list goes on and on. One of the things that I really feel proud about is to be able to tell the story through the lens of African Americans. So often, majority community get the resources to tell the African American story. But we feel that we are intelligent enough, empowered enough to amplify our own voices. So this project has received national attention from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. But this is my favorite part of the tour, ladies and gentlemen, that you started on the highway, Edgewood, Bimby Beach Road. You came down a gravel path, and then you got onto a wood-chipped rabbit trail, that I call it. But then you get to this great reveal. The reason this project is important to me, the Blacks of the Chesapeake, and our team, the Heritage Park is fascinating. We want people to have access, come down the trails, pick up a seashell, things I did as kids, write your name in the sand, and so forth. But what we really want to do is to put together the Blacks of the Chesapeake's environmental, educational, cultural, and historical opportunity center where we can teach and learn. And our goal is to have a floating barge out here, a living classroom, and talk about the science of the Bay, the history of the Bay, the cultural arts of the Bay. And no matter what your passion is, whether you want to be an accountant or computer specialist or journalist, write about this industry, because the more hands we have on deck, the better chance we have on saving this rich heritage for generations to come. What we really want to do is have a major paradigm shift. For the 30 years that I've been doing Blacks of the Chesapeake, if you pick up a book, college or university on the Chesapeake Bay, it's very seldom you see people of color. If they are depicted, the caption says crab picker and oyster shucker. But what I want to show is African Americans have owned seafood plants, 5-star restaurants, beaches, sites of recreation. And again, this is what we really want to show, that African Americans have been involved in all aspects of the industry, and either their story was ignored or erased, and this project is going to rectify both of those. One of the things I want people to walk away in 2 or 3 years when all of this is all built out is, I want people to come here and develop new memories. The same way I reflect back 50 years ago, 60 years ago on what it was like, I want people to create new memories, new stories with their family, their friends, the noble Chesapeake Bay in the background. And that way those memories, those stories can be passed on to future generations. And I want it to be, this bay is your bay, this bay is our bay, because again, this is someplace special.